Okay, we got it recording. Okay, great. And then where the heck is that document? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so this is the Newington Economic Development Committee informational meeting this is Wednesday, the 3rd of March at 10 a.m. And we're doing this remote via Zoom due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this committee is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. If you cannot access the meeting, please call 603-436-7640 for assistance. The Newington Economic Development Committee is hosting this with Karen Pollard, who has spent her career as Economic Development Committee chairperson in Rochester, New Hampshire, and I believe New Milford, Connecticut, and is coming into the private sector now and is relocating back up to the New Hampshire area. So welcome back, Karen. There is a Zoom link that has been published on the website for this meeting. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and let us know about that. But with that said, I'll just give a little bit of background on Karen and how we've interacted through the years. I got to know Karen about, gosh, it must have been 2007, 2008 when she was running the Economic Development Committee for Rochester, New Hampshire. And because our real estate circles, the people she was interacting with and the people I was interacting with intersected, we just ended up becoming friendly, and we've gotten to know each other through the years and have had Karen come in when she was, I believe, still with Rochester. She came in and presented just overall, here's what an economic development committee can do, because we were just launching at that point, and the Newington Economic Development Committee didn't really have a clue as to exactly all of the moving parts that we should be looking at, and Karen helped us put together a plan. Shortly thereafter, she went down to, I believe it was New Milford, Connecticut, and spent a couple of years there, and now she's coming back. So with that, Karen has some unique insights into the overall concept of retail and mixed use and how to best get the maximum value from a town's perspective into the community and how it can create vibrant and very good space for the community overall and developers and everybody involved. So with that said, I will turn it over to Karen to talk, Karen Pollard. And if you folks have questions that may or may not be listening, because right now it seems to be 3 of us, feel free to ask questions via chat or speak up if you'd like. Karen Pollard, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to everyone who was able to join in on this call today. And hopefully I can jump in with answer any questions that you might have. But I want to add a little bit about my background. Although Jeff did a great job, when I actually graduated from college, I joined several different retail companies and opened new stores all over the eastern coast of the U.S. for the most part, doing a lot of groundwork in outlets. But also I worked for Ralph Lauren, Maidenform, the lingerie company, and the Limited, and Ames Department Store was actually my first job after college. And I would go to various locations and help remodel stores. So in addition to all of the years working directly for communities in various parts of the U.S., I also have about 12 years of direct retail experience prior to that. So to say that today's topic is timely, yes, it absolutely is, and also that as Jeff said, I do have a significant amount of experience in both the retail world and the development world. So again, that was part of why Waterstone was so interested in recruiting me. And I'm very excited to be the director of development for them. They have 60 locations across the US and are currently at 99% occupancy in those 60 locations. So a highly successful company that has retail assets, office assets, industrial assets, and of course, several major mixed use projects across their portfolio. So very wonderful company for me to really get even more experience in all of the things that I enjoy, and in addition to making sure that communities are being wise in their choices as well going forward, so that we can be partners in success, not do deals that are only beneficial for one party. So that was really a big part of my focus and why I found Waterstone to be the right fit for me, because that's what they care about too. So I know that some of you have had dealings maybe with Waterstone in Portsmouth, where they own multiple properties, and also, of course, Rochester. And currently, one of the big projects that I've been directly involved with already is Rock Row in Westbrook, Maine. So I'll be able to draw from those various projects that I've been not only aware of for quite some time, but also am now, digging into the details and making sure that we are finding success with all of our partners. So I did want to add that. So one of the things that Jeff had talked to me about a little bit previously was the interest that Newington has with looking at zoning and thinking about the future of retail, which is, of course, a topic that I am always interested in. And definitely, even in my location when I was working in Connecticut for a small city there, that the retail world has obviously changed a lot. And a lot of these changes were going on long before COVID. So people had already been experiencing what they call multi-channel or omni-channel retail. So that means, doing research online, maybe making some purchases online, but also ordering for delivery to the store, or doing their research online and then going into the store to check out the products or items in person. COVID over the past year has ramped that up significantly and accelerated a lot of the changes we were already seeing in retail. About five to 10 years ago, so it was 2015 when I worked with Waterstone in Rochester, and one of our big focuses on the Granite Ridge was to make sure that it was as experiential as we could make it. So retail had already changed enough so that your regular old trips that you used to make to either a large shopping mall or a outdoor strip center were already changing. People didn't want to do the mundane trips in person anymore. They really wanted an experience. So that is why a lot of shopping centers at the time were either repositioning their centers to have more experiences, or in the case of Granite Ridge and many others that Waterstone has, they started adding public amenities like parks, green spaces for outdoor activities, kids events, family events, movies, free activities that the shopping centers could host for the community, whether that was I know Brickyard Square in Epping also has a number of amenities and events that they like to do at various holidays. And again, in Rochester, they were able to actually install a green space area that they've used for all kinds of stuff, bouncy houses, and again, with COVID, a lot of that had to change. but I think we're still, and in Rock Row, we're still seeing a significant amount of space dedicated to public recreation. So Rock Row actually has a trail system that they're connecting to that goes from Portland all the way into downtown Westbrook. And that is part of the development plan that we are working on. And again, we're partnering not only with the city of Westbrook, but also several universities and the city of Portland, Maine. And we're also getting the state involved for their recreational and Visit Maine assistance for that destination opportunity. So you would potentially be able to go shopping, go for a hike or walk. You could walk all the way into downtown Westbrook, or you could walk from downtown Westbrook to Rock Row and have a nice lunch. And again, we're looking at various transportation options that would get you back to wherever your car was. So again, what is the experience people are going to have when it comes to their visit and their experience? So one of the challenges, and people really around the U.S. were seeing this phenomenon with indoor malls in particular. So indoor malls kind of somehow lost a little bit of luster in many locations because it was kind of an expected experience. People knew what it was. It really hadn't changed a lot. The earlier retail model so in the 70s, when indoor shopping malls kind of took off, that was a known quantity. Everybody had to have an indoor mall. It saved you from having to be outside, which of course today I think that the expectation of consumers is really they don't mind necessarily being outside. They're probably only going to one or two stores at a time anyway. Their trips are shorter. You seldom see people in one shopping center for the entire day. Whereas back a couple decades ago, that was actually quite common. And I myself remember doing that when my kids were younger, going to one shopping center and pretty much spending the day and hitting the food court at lunchtime and making several trips back and forth to the car with stuff that I had purchased that day. It's obviously it's a little bit different now. People are doing more research, again, usually online prior to shopping. And the experience has changed, and people are very savvy consumers now. So you see, again, that earlier pre-shopping online very often, and then maybe even research different options, research different stores, research different prices, and evaluate the items prior to making a shopping trip. So you've got a significantly different experience. You still, when people get into a store, they still have plenty of impulse shopping, but even online, a lot of retailers have discovered how to increase sales through impulse purchases. I'm sure if any of you have shopped online in the last few years, the first thing that happens when you either like an item or put something into your shopping cart is they can't wait to tell you about other items that might go with that item you are purchasing, or that even might be similar or have an associated use. So, that technology has been around for quite a while, thank you, Amazon, and now everybody has some method of adding on to your shopping experience online. And certainly convenience and safety is a very big issue. During the last year, a lot of indoor shopping malls have ramped up their safety protocols as far as cleanliness goes. But in many cases, shopping malls had not always been the cleanest places anyway, and kind of many of them developed a reputation, as some outdoor centers did, for not their parking lots not being as safe as they could be, not as well maintained as they could be. And again, that experience of going to an indoor shopping center had gotten somewhat dated. And so again, when you see centers like Waterstones, where the maintenance is a high priority, as meticulous as they can be, there's not only green space incorporated into the parking lots. You don't see big fields of parking the way you used to, unbroken by trees and shrubs and landscaping. You see a very nice environment. It's clean, and it's very enjoyable for people to do their shopping in that type of situation, even if they're only going to one store, or whether they are doing multiple stores on the same trip. So that is kind of, I think, where we are currently in all of the centers that I'm working on with Waterstone. There is always some kind of outdoor amenity in addition to whatever we are planning as far as other items. We try to offer you retail, such as local businesses who maybe only have one location or a small number of locations. Something that is very local in origin so that it can be enjoyed by the community. We try not to have that cookie cutter experience, which again, I think goes back to the early days of indoor shopping malls, where you could be inside the mall and not know whether you were in New York or California, and other than the sales tax. So that is not the experience people are looking for these days. Again, they're much more sophisticated, and they want something that is local and unique when they go even to a shopping center that is more of a strip center. So I think that's kind of a good start or summary for that. Maybe I should just get into the mixed use a little bit, because I know that also.
Karen, if you could just go ahead and talk about what does mixed use mean generically, and then how have you seen it implemented, maybe not just with Waterstone, but specifically with Waterstone, especially over in the Portsmouth area, where I know they've done some good work. But if you could just talk about some of the collateral impacts that might occur, such as, what does it do to school systems, and how do you prevent it from becoming a burden to the entire community and all of that. So maybe you can talk about some of those items if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So again, there is the intent for a lot of developers to partner with the communities that they're located in and really be a beneficial element that is tied into the community. So a lot of locations, and again, in Portsmouth, we have Portsmouth Green, which is definitely mixed use. So mixed use is really any time that you have different compatible uses sharing locations. And of course, downtowns are probably the oldest example of that kind of development, where you would normally see retail with living space above or office spaces above. Those are two very regular uses that are very compatible. Newer developments, and especially we find millennials and younger generations really enjoy living close to amenities. So Rock Row, Portsmouth Green, there are many other developments that have intentionally gone and put retail and housing, apartments in many cases, but also it could be condos. And we also are seeing the addition of medical uses. So you see medical offices very frequently mixed in with retail, shopping, and apartment living, and public transportation. But you create a small, almost like neighborhood out of your shopping experience. Of course, the medical offices or other offices, community colleges are frequently a partner in these kind of developments. Those are the some of the examples of mixed use you'll find everywhere. And that has turned out to be fantastic and very, very good for the community, because in most cases you've got either excess retail space at this point, or you've got already the infrastructure needed to support additional residential development or additional office development, because the spaces that are there would already have water and sewer or electric utilities, natural gas. And again, that public transportation piece, while right now has certainly suffered a blow, that is, I think, something that we'll see come back once COVID is under control, and also we have adapted to stepped up protocols as far as cleanliness goes, because again, I think public transportation sometimes gets a bad rap when it comes to cleanliness. Certainly I found in New Hampshire, in southern New Hampshire, all of the public transportation was incredibly clean and very good services. So I think that is still going to come back as soon as travel comes back, and as, like I said, as soon as COVID is under control. So what you're seeing in a lot of cases, and there's many examples that you can find from all over the U.S., is dated or vacant retail space that was either overbuilt or is no longer necessary for use as strictly retail. And I have a couple specific examples I wanted to share with you, that those spaces are being looked at for adding mixes of uses together. So one example that is awfully frequent that I see is not just where you might take down an old Sears building or an old big box space and turn that into either an office building or an apartment building or a hotel. Those, again, are pretty common to see. I've also seen where they'll take an old big box space and turn it into some kind of higher education space, which can also be a great amenity in the community, because we know that as businesses' needs change, we have many people in the workforce who need to have their skills upgraded. And so community colleges in particular have put in many communities satellite spaces specifically for workforce training, and the state and federal government have been generous in providing funding for a lot of that training to occur. Most states have very active workforce investment boards. I know New Hampshire does, and so the use of some of this former retail space with new uses such as community colleges or living spaces is important. In Rock Row, outside of Portland, there are several colleges that have a variety of different spaces, and Rock Row is actually planning on having some graduate student housing as part of the development. So that Rock Row becomes the opportunity for the college to put in new housing close to amenities with public transportation without putting a strain on other resources that Portland or Westbrook might have. And again, making use of infrastructure that's already there in place, but its former use as a quarry is no longer necessary or needed. And that space needs to be revitalized so that it can once again contribute economically to the town's or the city's tax base. So, some of these former locations have great new lives ahead of them by adding different uses that maybe weren't in demand before. Again, 1980 was 40 years ago, and retail has changed so much. In addition, I know in Connecticut, we have a lot of retail space, and being close to the border with New York, we had a lot of people traveling from Westchester County into Connecticut, into the city I worked for, to shop because the sales tax was lower and the assortment was just as good. However, over the last 10 years in particular, the demand for retail space in the store has changed. Again, there's more pre-shopping experiences online, whether that's through social media, whether that's through a website, combination. But a lot of retailers, including mom and pop retailers, have adjusted to that by shifting their space utilization from 100% retail sales floor to 50% retail sales floor and 50% warehouse and distribution. They do a lot of shipping, especially that demand has ramped up a lot in the last 12 months. And I saw in particular a struggle with zoning because in the city I worked for, we had very traditional zoning, again, it was implemented in, I think, 1984, and really hadn't changed much in all of that time. And we really struggled to help our retailers adapt to the changing demands of customers and consumers because they were not allowed through our zoning to have so much warehouse and distribution space. And the truck traffic coming to the back door had started to almost exceed the car traffic at the front door. So we had to make changes to our zoning so that we wouldn't drive our own retailers out of business. And again, there were about 2,500 small independent retailers and restaurants who had sudden shifts in demand. We had seen the trends coming for quite some time, but overnight it was an urgent situation that had to be dealt with. So we did go through the process. Again, there's always a process to do the changes in zoning, but we really made our zoning much more flexible so that there could be not just a primary use, but a lot more ancillary uses, and mixed use became almost expected in every single project we did. So including changing the zoning for, we have 3 major shopping centers in the community, and I met with the owners of each one independently, along with a lot of the tenants, in order to discuss how we, the city, were going to help them adapt and be more successful in dealing with these changes proactively. So again, we were looking at ways we could make their situation more tolerable. And when the federal funding sources like PPP and EIDL loans and grants came through, we had many businesses unable to apply because their sales were not down the required amount. We actually had a couple businesses that had increased their sales by up to 40 and 50% over 2019. So, to say that we were successful in being proactive and in making some of those changes is probably an understatement. And I'll give a couple of specific examples. We had a small pet food manufacturer that was located in downtown of the city that I worked in a basement kitchen, because again, it's basically food grade production, and they had already outgrown their space, and all their sales were basically at farmers markets, and they had some online presence, but it wasn't a lot. And in 2020, of course, a lot of farmers markets didn't even open because of COVID. So there were a lot of limitations on their business. So they basically created a new website, and they added retail where people could order online and pick up at their location in downtown. And again, they moved to a bigger space. They opened a retail center so you could order online and pick it up. Eventually, they did find a few outlets for their products at certain places that opened. There's a large flea market that eventually opened. I think they finally opened in September or maybe late August. And we did find a few farmers markets for them to go to. And again, they ramped up their online and their shipping, got new packaging, but their sales were up 45% in 2020 compared to 2019. So, but their new space in downtown is manufacturing, retail, and warehouse and distribution. And that's all in one 2,500 square foot space. So again, those are kind of the opportunities we were seeing in folks coming to us. And again, we're about an hour outside of Manhattan. So we're getting this influx of people and their companies coming out of New York City. So we were able to fill a lot of vacant spaces. And again, we had very flexible opportunities. So we could take obsolete old space. We had a couple mill buildings. We actually had a whole shopping center that was vacant for remodeling when COVID hit. So when they were looking for when they finally finished in about July of last year, we had the opportunity to say, you know what, you can do a bunch of different things here. And we were able to attract a company doing mask manufacturing and retail sales. And again, they provided, they worked with other retailers in town and other places to have their merchandise sold there. Let's see. Oh, there was another one that went into our industrial park. That so they are actually constructing a brand new industrial building in the industrial zone, but they have a large retail component, and also I would say the largest amount of space is actually warehouse and distribution, which is why they wanted the industrial space to begin with, because the whole back side of their building are loading docks, but the front looks like kind of a tradesman's office with items again that you can order online and pick up. They will ship it to you, but if you need it right away, almost like an auto parts store, but it's not auto parts. So, but you're seeing mixed uses in a variety of situations. And again, going back to Portsmouth Green, you've got residential next to a shopping center where both can help support each other. You've got walkable amenities you can walk to. You've got a grocery store. You've got a general merchandise store. You've got fitness, clothing, and workout spaces together. And those are all great amenities to have together. And we're planning Rock Row with even more residential components and I think 1 or 2 hotels and entertainment. So we've got recreation, entertainment, retail, an innovation hall, which includes space for colleges, universities, research and development. And that is 2 million square feet. And probably 25% of that is going to be residential of some kind. Another 25% will be what we call institutional. So that'll be a conference center, this innovation hall, the presence of a variety of other agencies, and then probably 40% is the entertainment retail piece.
Oh, Karen, this is
so
Jeff.
I guess I can ask. Go ahead.
If I can just ask a couple of questions on that. How have you found it? Because one of the concerns that justifiably most people in town would have is by having such an influx of potential housing, how do you prevent that from overwhelming our small town with a school that has a maximum capacity of, call it 65 kids? And
right.
It's a small, I'll say I think it's K through 6, but my kids didn't go there, so don't quote me on that. But I think it's K through 6 or 1 through 6. Anyway, it's a small facility. One of the concerns is that, and then you're mentioning that you folks were able to, in I think it was Connecticut, use formerly industrial space and turn that into industrial / retail. how did that work with zoning regulations, and how have you found changes in zoning regulations to either encourage or discourage consideration by developers? Because there were three questions there. One about, so I'll let you go there.
Yeah, so let me start with the school question, because this is a common perception that a lot of communities have, that they'll be overrun with school children, or that other services in their town, police is another one that I hear a lot about, that could be impacted by a lot of this new housing development. And what we've found, and there's numerous studies on this across the U.S. in various places, is that the risk of that is actually quite low. Again, in Connecticut, where we had some new, they have different regulations similar to Massachusetts, in that they actually require certain levels of affordable housing in their developments. Like I said, there's a similar regulation in Massachusetts, and there's frequently concern from neighbors and abutters and other people in town that affordable housing might bring in the wrong sort of people, or that they will bring in lots more children, and the school system can't handle that. And again, these are not uncommon concerns or questions, but the truth of the matter is it just, those kind of living situations are not as attractive for families with kids as we kind of perceive them to be. In fact, we found in Connecticut that we had a lot fewer than one kid per residence, and even a 2-bedroom apartment, you're more likely to see a young couple either starting, with their first apartment, or 2 roommates sharing space, or people who are downsizing. So you're much less likely to see kids in that environment than you would be in, say, a residential subdivision of single-family homes, which are really where people with families are still gravitating towards that kind of living environment, or where you have more open space, like certain kinds of townhouses, where you've got a lot of open area and playgrounds and things like that. And I think you'll see even in southeast New Hampshire that you're more likely to see kids in those spaces than you are necessarily in smaller apartments, studios, 1-bedrooms, even 2-bedrooms. You're going to see probably 2 people in a lot of those 2-bedroom apartments, not so many kids. And if you do, it might be maybe one teenager who hasn't left for college yet, as compared to, 2 kids sharing a bedroom and the 2 parents in the other room. That we're just not seeing that. In Portsmouth Green, in fact, I think almost all of the apartments, even including the 2 bedrooms, are almost all almost 100% no kids. In Connecticut, we have about a 30% affordability rate in a big housing development. We just did 150 units of apartments adjacent to the downtown. And again, there was a lot of concern about things like parking too. We allowed 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and there was quite a lot of discussion about allowing that in zoning, because ordinarily we would have required 2 parking spaces per unit regardless. So we did allow less parking, and it's working beautifully. And there are, I think, 0.75 kids per unit there, and there are some 3-bedrooms in there in that development. So we also had several handicap units. So we also have some affordable units for seniors as well. So that has actually turned into be a beautiful mixed age development. Not a lot of kids, not a lot of open space.
On that note,
and
On
We
that
saw
note,
no impact on the schools at all.
on that note, though, that was with a requirement of affordable housing there, and New Hampshire, I don't think has that same requirement. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. New Hampshire does not, I believe, have that requirement. It is entirely up to the developer and the town. I know some towns are considering adding their own requirements for that, but at this time, I don't believe that's in place. But of course, discussions about affordable housing continue in New Hampshire, and at some point there may be some legislation about that.
Okay.
But at this point, there isn't. So.
Okay. And quick question for you, going back to the and starting, just talk about the mixed use that may or may not have any kind of conversation about residential, where you had the former industrial space become somewhat residential. How did that work with the zoning changes that were needed, and how and that created more value there, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. So in all of the places that we allowed mixed uses, what we're seeing is a higher demand for those spaces. And we just did a revaluation. So in Connecticut, they are required to do revaluations for tax assessments every 5 years. And so that we just did it this past year in 2020. And we saw significant increases in all of the locations where we took off the single use restriction. So some of those uses went up as much as 15% from the 5 years previous. And in Connecticut, I don't know how many of you are familiar with their economy there. Their economy never really recovered from the big recession in the early part of the decade. And so that was significant for the town, who was really pushing to try to make economic development happen, and still some pretty big vacant spaces to allow that. And we actually, going back to when I was in Rochester, we did the same thing with the former Cabletron space. When I got there in 2003, Rochester had 1 million square feet of what they considered vacant industrial space. And what we did was, again, we put in a variety we broke those buildings up into a variety of types of spaces. So we still had industrial, we had warehouse and distribution, again, in the former Cabletron warehouse building. But we also put in service businesses. We put in the bus company for the schools went in there. We had Granite State College went in there. We had a daycare center, the YMCA went in there. We allowed for the flexibility for the buildings to be reused more in keeping with what the market demand was. So we let the owners of the buildings come in and say, I have this potential tenant who wants, 25,000 square feet. How can we work this in our zoning? And by allowing the market to tell us what the demand was and working with that, the value of those buildings skyrocketed. And compared to, vacant space, which is what we were looking at, 1 million square feet of vacant space and no jobs created, we were able to really put all of that space back into action, create, almost 1,000 jobs, which, not what Cabletron had, but the buildings increased in value so much because we were able to, I shouldn't say we, the owners of the buildings were able to ask much higher rents for the smaller spaces than for huge spaces that nobody wanted. So, you have to listen to the market to tell you. We also did a number of feasibility studies, and in Connecticut, I had done a number of them when I first arrived. We did a hotel analysis to tell us, what the demand for additional hotel space was. They did not have a brand name hotel. They had several B&Bs that were quite lovely, and we didn't want them to go away. But what we found was we couldn't attract the events that we wanted to attract, the tourist business that was so important to Western Connecticut, and again, an hour outside of New York City. We needed more space for weddings that we didn't have, family reunions. We are still talking even now with hotels, but hotels are extremely selective on where they're going to go. But we feel our chances, because of the growth of the community in the last 2 years, are great. And again, this year I was there 2 years in Connecticut. Both years we had a reduction in the mill rate for taxes. This year it went down by $1.25 per thousand. So that is, we had the revaluation, but we also had $50 million in new construction last year. So, and this is a town of 27,000 people. So we're not talking about a really big place, but we tried to, again, listen to the market, go with what was going to give the town an increase in value, increase in jobs, put more people to work. And again, last year we held several virtual hiring events for employers to participate in for free, so that when they opened back up in June and July and August, as they were reopening and getting back up to full speed, or as full speed as they could, restaurants I think are still at 50% inside, that they had pools of people to choose from for local hiring, so that they didn't have to kind of go it on their own. We tried to put in everything we could to help support new businesses moving in. And again, the change in zoning, not everybody was a fan of that at first, but we said, we were going to pilot test it. And we did the first year in 2019, because again, we had a lot of retail space that was vacant. We had a former TJ Maxx space that was, almost 30,000 feet sitting there empty. And all those spaces are occupied now, even though, there's medical offices, there's a dialysis center coming in that's supposed to open in a couple of weeks. A physical therapist went in to some of that space, a medical billing office. So the hospital ran out of room and wanted to move their back office people off the hospital campus, because they had COVID patients and COVID testing and all this stuff. And they wanted to get people who were non-essential to that use out of the hospital. So they took a former retail space and turned it into their medical billing offices. And that was a reuse of space. I don't think we would have anticipated that, but they were more than happy to sign a 5-year lease to get people off the campus. And again, they're increasing safety for their employees, and also keeping their hospital environment with the fewest number of essential people as necessary, so that there was lower risk of people getting sick with COVID before the vaccine came out. So again, this all happened rapidly, and retail spaces are basically white boxes that you can turn into a variety of different uses. We also allowed a lot of the retail spaces to add additional entrances and exits. That's really important, so that they could separate their uses. So if they're doing manufacturing and warehouse and distribution in the back, they needed their own back door. Or if they wanted to add retail to an industrial space, they usually would want to make a change to the front and add windows and make it more like a retail store, like a retail space that was
so Karen,
nice.
So, in the last couple of minutes here, so in my opinion, and I don't, by this opinion is not necessarily that of the entire EDC board here, but I think it's important that we have all of the options open to developers and people interested in these properties. And my concern is, changing the zoning regs to appear to the folks that might be interested in our town, to make them more restrictive, or at least to put up, I'll say, speed bumps, is, in my opinion, a bad idea. We're not dealing with a town of 27,000. We're dealing with a town of just under 800 residents. So my concern is that the tax rate will inordinately be borne by these 800 residents, which is basically, I think, about, as I recall, it's maybe I think it's about 300 homes, maybe something like that. I can't remember exact number of homes, but so what you're saying that you found to be flexible in the zoning and the creation of the planning board information and how that all plays out is important to be flexible, not so much hardcore, hard and fast restrictive. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so that is that's a very good point. As an investment in real estate, developers especially know that they have to be able to adapt any development that they do based on the market, right? Even from the beginning of their planning process to the time that the center opens, or in a project like the Ridge or Portsmouth Green or Rock Row, you've got phased development, and that things are going to change even while you're working on it. So as far as investing in either acquiring property, land, or doing a redevelopment of any kind, developers and real estate investors are always going to look for properties that have that flexibility, so that if the market shifts and changes, that they are not stuck with something that no longer fits and can't be used. So nobody wants vacant space that's sitting there. That's always the key to good real estate investment is you've got to be able to flex when the market flexes, and that's why when you build a building, you want it to be as multi-purpose as you can possibly make it. So actually, there's a term in industrial development. It's called flex space, and it's literally that. The analysis that I just finished in Connecticut said we had demand for another 125,000 square feet back in 2019 of additional flex space, industrial / multi-use, and again, those are numbers you can determine, and again, the problem with vacant space is that the value to the town goes down, right? So if you have vacant space and it sits vacant for a long time, those are taxes that you're losing from when it used to be occupied and full. And not being able for the developer or the owner of that property to not have the ability to change because the market changed, it's bad for the developer, and that makes their investment in your town not a good investment. And the more limits there are, the less likely it is that building's going to sell for full value. If it's got more opportunity to be full, it's higher in value, and either the current owner will redevelop it, or a new buyer will come in, pay a higher price, and then redevelop it. So, the more rigid you are, the less value there is in a special purpose type building. So whether you're talking about a shopping center or industrial space or even old schools, right? The town I was in had lost so many kids because people are having fewer children and a lot of the population was getting older. And I know that's the same case in New Hampshire. They had 2 vacant schools that they had to find new uses for. And so again, we did some feasibility studies, and both of them came back that they should be the highest and best use in the current market was for housing. And so, that needed a change in zoning, but the infrastructure was already there. And the calculation as far as new students was not that high. Again, I think it was 0.5 new students per 2-bedroom unit. Most of the 2 bedrooms were expected to be filled by older adults that were downsizing. And again, those young families were moving into the residential homes, which actually made the school population stable and it kept our school as efficient and as full as and in use as it could be without going over that.
That's
So
great.
you have to look at the pieces for your town, and again, you can hire, if you don't have the talent in town, you can hire a consultant to do the work for you. There's a lot of planning grants out there that certainly in Rochester we made use of. We actually did several housing studies with the Seacoast Housing Coalition, and in Connecticut we hired a consultant and we got a $50,000 grant from the state planning office to do that. So there are opportunities to help with the cost on that.
That's perfect. I think Mike, and we've got about 2 minutes left here. Mike, I think you have maybe a question or two, or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna be 2 minutes, but thank you, Karen. I appreciate you being with us once again in a different capacity, but you helped us get started. We were talking the other night how you were at one of our first meetings. You were like a midwife that helped birth this committee. So thank you for coming back and to help us some more. I wanted to you mentioned Portsmouth Green, and you said that it was almost 100% no kids. The town had in fact had a study that referenced the Portsmouth Green project, and they had some numbers at that point that were quite low. It wasn't no kids, but it was quite low. I wonder if it would be possible for you to look into that, and I realize it's not a static number. It could be floating, but at some point, I think I think your company reported the actual results upon rent up to the city, and it would be helpful for us to have that specifically, if for nothing else but to confirm what our consultants told us, which a lot of people in the town, not a lot, but some people in the town, particularly the planning board, are reluctant to accept it because they can't believe it's that low. But it's driven by the nature of the unit.
Well, I mean, if you look at the space, yeah, well, and it really is. And if you go over there and look at the space, it when you see a unit and you tour the space, and it's really, I when my kids were small, it's not a living choice I probably would have made, because
Right.
it's not designed to, in that way. And certainly it's wonderful if you are a young couple or a young professional, and you want your amenities right there, or if you're downsizing and again you want your amenities, you want to not have to worry about raking leaves and shoveling snow. Those are great options. And
Right.
and so, but what we have found, and I know the number seems incredibly low, but what we're finding is that the people who want to live in those buildings and in that environment have different needs than the needs of families. And especially if there's more than one child, you're not likely to see them living in an apartment building like that. You're much more likely to see them at least in a townhouse environment, where they have their own little bit of space, at least a little bit. And certainly, even the development that I just am moving away from in Connecticut has a ton of open space. It has a swimming pool. It has lakefront. It's very nice, but very few kids in there. It's probably 50% younger folks and 50% people who downsized and still wanted some open space. And obviously the amenities there are nice, but I can definitely look into what the current numbers are.
Yeah, any frame of reference. you know, whether it's current or whether it's upon rent up, whatever's available to you. I don't want to turn it into
Right.
a research project, but whatever's available.
Oh, no, I wouldn't. Yeah, no, we have a management company that runs the facility for us now that it's pretty much complete. And I can just ask them because I'm sure they keep that number current. They've got to know who's in the building.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they have a list of kids or units with kids, so they can figure that out.
Yeah. So secondly,
I'm going to be signing off in about 2 minutes.
you know, I'm doing what I can do here. I just got on to be able to talk. So
go right ahead.
Secondly, your company has another project that you didn't mention that isn't, or at least I didn't hear it. That's in Portsmouth. It's West End Yards. That's only now in development and lease up. It's my understanding there's 250 units there. Do you know whether there's been any rent up at all on those units and what they are reflecting regarding children, or are they still under construction? Every time I drive by, it looks different, so I don't know.
Yes, I actually haven't gotten a full briefing on that one right now, but
okay.
It's only my 5th day with Waterstone.
Yeah, well, you're doing great. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, could you put that on your radar to get us some information?
Yeah, I actually was planning on doing that. I'm driving into Needham right now, so that's certainly one of our active projects that we are very excited about, and you know, it's definitely. I'm pretty sure that's still in the construction phase, but we might have some pre-leasing done. I actually don't know the exact status.
Yeah. Well, you got Bula out there pushing it for you. So besides the residential there's 20,000 square feet of office and 20,000 square feet of retail. If you could, when you make any inquiries along the way, if you can give us any idea of what the market is telling you in that particular location, because it is very much like some of the areas we're talking about in Newington. If you could tell us what the market's telling you about being able to rent that office and retail space and what kind of uses are being attracted, that would be helpful. So thank you. I really appreciate this. I think it's obvious that we didn't get everybody on this call, and I believe that's because of the difficulty in locating the Zoom login. So we may be asking you to come back and do this again, and I hope you would be able to, but we'd understand if you said, hey, I already did it once.
Karen, thank you very much. And
it's not a problem. I am happy to come back anytime that you guys would like. Again, I'm going to be neighbors. I'm moving back to Portsmouth on the 15th of March. So again, I love the area. I think it's a great investment for not just for my company, but also for myself. So, you know,
we're very lucky to get you back. Our next meeting is on the 25th, so we'll talk and maybe
yes, please, and yes, please consider staying as flexible as you can, because it will pay off in the long run. Again,
music to our ears. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you can find many examples out there right in our own backyard, you know, so to speak. Yeah. So happy to continue that conversation at any time.
Thank you.
Good deal, Karen. Thank you very much. And
thank you. And thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Karen.
See you.